Hello, welcome to CarCast and Edmunds podcast. I'm Matt, the moderator, Deandra, here with Alistair Weaver. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Matt. Happy Friday afternoon as we record this.
I uh I see a big balloon behind you. If
You see a
anybody's
big
watching
balloon.
YouTube, his kids must have had a birthday party.
Kid's third birthday party. Yeah, very excited. Big day in the Weaver household. He got a wooden toolkit, which was nice as his one of his presents. So I was making a wooden helicopter this week. So
Okay. But
domestic bliss with a few screams and cries along the way.
the kids are like old enough to kind of understand what dad does and figures out why does dad bring a new car home all the time? Because I know they do like the cars.
They're getting that. Like Cybertruck is the one where like my 3-year-old Dorian will always shout about this. Like, if we see a Cybertruck, he'll shout Cybertruck now. So he's getting there. Also, like you really, it's my six. She's almost six earlier, and she will always tell because her grandparents got a Land Rover Discovery Sport out in France, and she'll look at a Land Rover product or a Range Rover, and she'll say, "That's like Pappy's car." And I find it fascinating. She looked like a full-size Range Rover, which doesn't look that much like a Discovery
Yeah.
Sport. And she's like, that's like Pappy's car. It's funny, interesting. So she's developing. She knows that her teacher at school has got a Tesla
Uh-huh.
because she can recognize this. So we're getting there. And on a Saturday morning, once a month, I live in Manhattan Beach, just south of LA, and there's a great Cars and Coffee, which started off small and has now got like 300 people a week every time. It's once a
Yeah.
month. So I tend to take them down there, and that's like my little injection once a month of, this is a Testarossa. This is
Yeah.
a.
Is Manhattan Beach paying teachers Tesla money?
I wouldn't like to comment, but I mean, like tough job. I mean, do you want to teach 23, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds? I
Yeah.
don't, you know, honestly, I think this is an easier job.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they could be leasing it. It could be used. It could
I,
be the former Edmunds car for all we know, with a bunch of miles on it and hard driving.
she's fan. Elia's teacher's fantastic, so no no complaints in any way.
Um, all right. So before we get started, let me remind you about our friends at Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one source of betting. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Um, I thought maybe we could get into now that we're still kind of in the beginning of 2025, you guys have had your eyes on which cars are leaving the fleet, which cars are coming into the fleet. You've acquired a couple of new vehicles. I don't know if you've taken delivery of them all yet, or some of the orders are just happening, but give us a little kind of peek behind the curtain of what we're going to see this year.
Yeah, so every year we try and buy up a bunch of vehicles that we're kind of like high interest vehicles. We're not calling it the long term test, we're calling it, I've got to get this right, I'm going to get shot, but they basically like the 1 year ownership test. Because
Okay.
everybody say like, like the problem with car journalism is like, oh yeah, long term. It's like, what's that mean? So we're calling it
Yeah.
basically a 1 year ownership test. So we try and take a mix of like cars that people are buying, cars that particularly interest, cars that we awarded. So in the last few weeks, we talked on the show about buying a Lexus GX, which is great. We just bought a Ram 1500.
Okay.
Obviously not the V8 anymore, the V6, but we try and go for a popular model there. It's always great to run a full-size truck. We just had an F-150 which we sold, so we bought a Ram to replace it. EX30, the new little Volvo EV, which
Right.
is super cute and super small, but the first ones in the country are actually the dual motor, so it's super small, super cute, and super. I think we literally bought that today, so I haven't even seen that yet.
Okay.
And then a Ford Mustang Dark Horse. We had so much interest in our GT 500 that we kept it for 4 years. We use it for the Edmunds U-Drag series, and just an opportunity. We like to kind of have a bit of a mix in the fleet, and
Yeah.
so the Dark Horse is a really interesting vehicle because right now, I mean, I know there's a new gas charger on the way, but
Right.
no V8 at the moment, not yet at least. So it's kind of an interesting place in the market. So we just could take delivery of a Dark Horse. which is kind of ironic because it's bright blue. When it
Yeah, yeah,
arrived, I was like, why have we? I thought this was called a dark, because I thought it was all the launch ones were in a really kind of like subdued, sort of grey blue color, which looked really cool. Ours
yeah,
is like really bright blue and pretty, it's kind of
yeah. It's
obnoxious
nice though.
blue. It
Yeah,
is
it's
nice.
nice.
It is nice, but it's kind of obnoxious at the same time.
Now, I remember you let the cat out of the bag and you bought the automatic.
Yeah, we bought the automatic. I was like, yeah, the problem is, particularly if we use it for Edmunds U drags, everybody on the team wanted the manual because it's just so much more fun. And then that's just the reality is it's just way slower. And every race we did with it, we'd have always gone, well, of course, the reason it lost is because it's got a manual gearbox. And if we had the auto, everything would have been different. And then we'd
Yeah,
have just got a whole load of abuse. So we bought the 10-speed auto, which will be less fun, but faster.
yeah. Now
And it's a
these
good gearbox.
the long-term test cars, I know people say maybe you hold them for a year and they kind of get in their head, maybe that's 10 to 12,000 miles, but most of what you guys do is probably somewhere closer to 30,000 miles on a car.
Yeah, I mean,
You
one of the
kind of
challenges we've
force,
had,
kind of jam pack 3 years of ownership, 3 years of ownership into roughly a year.
well, what it's kind of ironic, but um, one of the challenges post-pandemic is that we don't get the office as much, we don't drive around as much. So actually putting miles on cars, when we all used to commute into the office, every car would naturally get, some cases 50, 100 miles a day. Now we just don't drive as much. And that's been a bit of a challenge to actually put miles on the cars. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, it depends. I think things like the Lexus GX, every time somebody goes skiing or goes on a family vacation, they're going to take that, so that'll get a ton of miles. Everybody's going to love the Mustang, so it's get a ton of miles. So you got to share it out a little bit. And the idea
Yeah.
is that loads of people in the office get to drive them, different experiences, that sort of thing. But I'm excited about the Mustang. I love the Mustang. I mean, if it was my car, I'd have a manual. I mean, the Dark Horse, you think, oh, well, it's not a GT 500, it's not a Shelby. It's not, but it's still got 500 horsepower.
Right.
But it isn't cheap. It's 70, what did I pay? I've got it in front of me here. What was it 74 grand? But then we paid eight, that's 74 grand all in because we got the Dark Horse pack on it. The Dark Horse, what is the handling pack?
Yeah.
So these things aren't cheap. Um, but it's still a lot of car.
Right. And I don't know that you guys have all of the options. I think there's like a you have the handling pack, but I think there's
Now,
like a track pack or something
I
on
think we got the main that gives you a larger front splitter, gurney flap.
okay. Yeah.
You got the stiffer sway bars, Trofeo RS tires, all pretty aggressive stuff. And then of course you have and I think we got the Recaros, which are 2 grand. So I think, we were just looking at it here, like so we paid 74 for this. When we in 2020, our Shelby GT 500 was only 81. So it just shows how much, prices have crept up in recent years. So, I mean, when they bring out the Shelby, which surely they will eventually, how much is that going to be? It's got to be more than
Yeah.
the Dark Horse. So that's going to be a 90 grand car, easy.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, all signs are kind of indicating that Ford did not renew a license with the Shelby brand. So I wouldn't actually expect a GT500 or a GT350. Certainly not a GT350 because Shelby America just announced their GT350 at Barrett Jackson, saying Ford has not renewed that license. But I saw that Ford did renew or get again the I think it was the Boss trademark. So we may get another high performance version, but it could be a Boss something. I don't know, Boss 302, Boss, whatever they want to call her, just Boss
Yeah.
Mustang. And they've mixed it up over the years with Bullet and Mach 1 and the Shelby brand, and now they had the Boss 302 a while back and the R version. So I guess they're bringing that back. So I don't know that we're going to see another Shelby, and I don't know if the Boss is going to replace the Shelby in that it, supercharged and paddle shift and whatever, but and $100,000 or wherever the GT500, like I know the one you guys got was in the 80s, but you were intentionally, I remember talking to you years about it, intentionally trying to get just the engine and the power without, a lot of the options to keep. Can you get a GT500 for under 85 grand?
I
And you
do
can.
remember that because I think at the time it was you go for like the was that handling pack with all the carbon wheels and everything else, and suddenly it was 100 grand, and we didn't do that. I also think the one that we got was the coolest one with the little gurney flap, looked way better than the big wing. But you're right, I didn't know. I'd be ashamed if the Shelby name like leaves a Mustang because the GT50 the GTD that's
Yeah.
not a Shelby, right? That's a Multimatics car who build the Ford
Yeah.
race cars, but that's not a Shelby
It's
either.
not a
So
Shelby brand.
and
No.
Dark Horse they just made up, right? They just made up a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I haven't. I've seen it in the garage. I haven't driven it yet. I'm actually driving it. We're shooting some more Edmunds U drags next week, so I'm going to be driving it there. So looking forward to have a go. And we kind of let the cat out the bag, something like
Yeah.
that, the horse out the stable, whatever you want to say. So I think we are going to look to supercharge this because Ford does like I think it's like 10 grand, 10 or 11 grand. They do the kit, which
Yeah.
suddenly gives you GT 500 performance. And the interesting thing about that shit is 500 horsepower, but when I drove it last time, I thought it could actually handle more. So it'd be very interesting to see how it
And that
handles the supercharger.
supercharger package from Ford, I think, is 800 or somewhere around 810
Yeah.
horsepower. So Ford's really digging in on with Farley getting into racing. Jim Farley kind of pushing forward it more into racing or allowing them to get into racing. Their deal with F1 and what he's doing with GT3 uh, and uh, and Le Mans. They've got a full prototype car. They're going to race at Le Mans. The Ford Performance catalog is really kind of beefing up and offering turnkey supercharger packages with a warranty is has been good. And it's going to be 800. I think it's 800, 810. I don't recall off the top
It's,
of my head, but it's
I mean,
definitely 800.
if you listen,
Plus.
Foley's the CEO of Ford, and he's come out and basically said, I think this is a straightforward business decision. We ain't doing boring cars anymore.
Yeah.
There's just no point because people are going to buy Chinese cars, Korean cars, whatever it may be. So we are going to, and we're not big enough. So we, as Ford, I guess, going to, we're going to focus on, we had him on the show, didn't we? We're going to focus on off-road. We're going to show for on performance, trucks, interesting stuff. And there's always a danger when you let a proper car guy run a car company. It's always like that. That would say lunatics running the asylum or whatever. And Akito Toyota did quit as
Yeah.
boss of Toyota because he thought he was too much of a car guy. Although ironically now his hybrid strategy looks pretty sound. So it'd be an interesting journey. But Jim's been there a few years now, and I knew him back in his Ford of Europe days. So
Yeah.
he knows what he's doing, and yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's good for us, right? It gives us more to talk about.
Well, I mean, Ford did lose $5 billion on EVs, so that was probably not the best
Well,
strategy.
I'm not sure anybody isn't losing money on EVs, and everybody has to do them. So
I
I was,
think I think it was Rivian that just came out recently and said because there was a deal with Trump being in office right before he got it into office, Rivian took advantage of some big loan that they were able to get from the government under the Biden administration, something like $6 billion, and they just want to keep making sure that's going to happen so they can still have access to that money with all the Doge stuff and the cuts that are happening. And somewhere in that discussion, I think their CEO said they still are losing on average of around $30,000 per vehicle, like across the fleet. And until they can start making less expensive, higher volume, like their R2 or R3 or whichever one they're planning on next. So the money they were borrowing was for the new assembly plant for the smaller car, which is interesting because the smaller cars, although higher volume, aren't usually as profitable,
hmm.
unless you're Porsche 911. But, the margin on F-150s is probably way better than the margin on Ford Mustangs, you know.
Yeah, I was just looking while you were saying, I was having a quick look at, like Rivian just posted its financial thing. So, I mean, the trouble is, his startup, it's like, it's all sort of smoke and mirrors, isn't it? But basically, they're saying that, where is it here? terms of guidance, Rivian sees its 2025 that full year adjusted EBITDA loss in the range of 1.7 to 1.9 billion.
Yeah.
So it's, but you look at that, somebody was coming out on it the other day on saying, oh, well, why is Tesla not paying tax? Well, the reason Tesla's not paying tax is because they lost money for years and you'd carry that forwards. And this
Yeah.
is, this is all fully legitimate accountancy, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's Rivian's share price? $13 at the moment. What was it? What was it at its peak? I'm just looking now. Don't want to get too much into financials, but it's, what was it? Was it peaking at like about $120? No, a high of 100 and nearly $180. It's now
Yeah.
$13. But Rivian, I feel like of all of them, Rivian's in a decent place. Lucid's got a lot of Saudi money behind it, so as long as they keep
Yeah.
pumping that in, they're established companies now, and let's hope they stick around. And Tesla, I mean, is Tesla really a car company anymore? I don't know, but they'll keep going. And yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about this last week. It's interesting for years. The other thing I was looking at, and we're slightly changing subjects. Somebody flashed up to me the other day about the used car values, and I was looking at something like an EQE. Now, when it was new, we were like, oh, it's a decent car. It's not a world beater.
Yeah.
But now they're like 45 grand. The residual values are awful.
Yeah.
But
They're
suddenly, as a
terrible.
second-hand buy, you like go, actually, 45 grand for a car with like 10,000 miles on it. That's a hell of a lot of car. That's suddenly become, for me, that suddenly becomes really desirable. Like, are you going to buy a Model 3 at 40 grand, or are you going to buy a used EQE? I
Yeah.
mean, that's a lot of car for, 40 to 50 grand.
And it's not like it's an awful car. I think it just sort of
No,
missed the mark. Like the design is kind of a love it or hate it. It's got kind of an egg shape.
bit
I don't think
eggy.
it was, it just I don't think it really appealed to that audience, the Mercedes-Benz audience, and getting the Mercedes-Benz owners into that car. They're just not doing it. So are they going to bring new people to the brand for that
Uh,
EV? And it was expensive when it came out if you're buying it new. So it was just kind of a tough sell. But you're right. I think it's probably a really good used buy because it's not a terrible car. If you had said this car was awful and the battery sucks, but that's why
Oh,
it's,
I'm
you know,
just looking on our parent company for
yeah,
full disclosure, CarMax's website, and somebody sent me this earlier. Like an EQE 350. So 2023 Mercedes-Benz EQE 350, 44,000 with 16,000 miles on the clock. I mean, that's a great buy. An EQE 500 as a sedan,
yeah.
50 grand with 5,000 miles on the clock. I mean,
And both of those cars, what were they?
that is a
Double
hell
that
of,
when they were new?
yeah, I dread to think, but yeah, I mean, getting on that, yeah, depending on how it's specified. EQE 350, 43 grand and 15,000 miles. I mean, EQE AMG rocket ship, 70 grand with 6,000 miles. I mean, these are mega deals. There's an EQS here, EQS 450 plus. So what's that? That's over 100 grand. 40 grand, like 39,000 with 46,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's a hell of a car for that money. So, yeah, it's this sort of flip. We're just about to launch a video on our wrap of our Lucid, and because we bought the Grand Touring and it was 140 odd grand, we will have lost $3 a mile in depreciation on that car.
Yeah.
Which is a really, we'll talk about it next week when it comes out and stuff. But it's a really interesting,
You know,
um, it's a
I
really
just
interesting film.
I just took my Lightning in for service, just some warranty fixes and some recalls and stuff, and they did it all pretty quickly and did a great job on it. But oftentimes you'll take your car in for service, and then the used car department's always sniffing around. You get a text within hours going, "We just saw your car in for service," and they send you the test. They go, your car is in high demand these days. Would you be interested in hearing an offer if we bought it from you? I'm like, sure, send me the offer. And they're like, here you go. And it's like, I don't know, $47,000. And I kind of just texted back with a laughing, going, yeah, sorry, buddy, not even close. Uh, it, it's not even close because I'm so upside down on that thing. It was like, he's like, well, we could probably go up a couple of grand. I was like, until you hit double that, I'm not sure how you're gonna buy this goddamn thing from me.
I- I'm not doing. There's another one here actually because we were thinking about EVs, plug-in hybrid, BMW 530e. So that's the That's the previous gen 5 Series, but like still a really nice. That's a really nice car. Um, and that is 30. What's that? 34,000 with 30,000 miles on it. That's, there is some really, there's some really appealing stuff here. But
Yeah.
anyway, what I'm saying is like somebody's haircut in the new market actually starts to look pretty appealing in the used market.
Yeah, that's how maybe that's how your teacher has a really nice Tesla.
Audi e-tron Premium Plus. That's Premium Plus is like top spec, 2023, 39 grand with 13,000 miles on it.
Yeah. Except you say Audi e-tron, I don't even know what that one, which one that is. Is that
That's the thing. That's big. That's like
it's like a
uh
Q8?
yeah,
Is
that's
it
Q8
SU?
big. That's Q8 big. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice one.
A friend of mine locally, he works in the movie business. He bought one new, took a massive loss on it. I think he leased it new, took a massive loss on it, handed it back, but loved the car. And then suddenly look at the used market. It's like, hang on a minute, I can get like the same car but in a better trim for like even less. So he then
Yeah.
went out and bought a used one. So he like when he done all the maths, he's like, in the end, I'm kind of up. But yeah, that's a lot of car for not a lot of money. So I
Yeah.
guess what I'm saying is, yeah, everybody talks about the values, but if you're a used shopper, there's some great
So
buys up there.
tell us what do you know about the specs? How did you buy the Volvo EX30 and the Ram 1500?
So the RAM we've gone for the obviously not the V8 anymore. It's the V6.
Yeah.
We try and buy the way we try and look at it is we try and buy like popular models. We try and look at where the market is, and then sometimes we'll add on a few options because they're interested to talk about which are perhaps like novel things or things that are unique to that car, which are key talking points. So things like some of the autonomous tech and things like that, things that we think will be of interest to the consumer. But we try and we try and buy like popular examples of that car. The EX30 is a little bit different because the only ones that are available at the moment are the dual motor, which is like I think it's like the fastest accelerating Volvo ever, even though it's this tiny little sort of city car. So that's a little bit different. But I think with the Ram, we've gone for something that's representative, shall we say, that we don't want something fully loaded. Even so, it's an 80 grand truck. They just are now, aren't they? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's a nice truck, but and it's got the horsepower. I mean, it's 540 horsepower. I'm not sure exactly which engine that you got with it.
It's the high output V6. We
Okay.
should get Steve. We should get Steve back on. Steve Ewing, who came on a few weeks ago. He now runs a lot of our car buying and selling.
Yeah.
So he's been the one that doing the deals with the dealers and moving and shaking. So we should get
Yeah.
him back on and talk through the process. But yeah, I generally get to send them and it's like, what do you think of this one? And what do you think of this one? And it's like, yeah, we
Right.
vetoed the I vetoed the Violet Macan EV that somebody wanted at one point. I think that was Steve actually.
And then you guys didn't offer like the Ram Charger. You just went for the
Well,
straight
it's not
up
available
Rams.
yet. I mean, I think
Yeah.
later down the line, the Ram Charger, we talked about like cars that are interested in driving this year. I think the Ram Charger is right up there. I think that's going to be a really interesting vehicle. That's the one with the range extender.
And then
Uh,
we're taking a look at the EX30. I think this is you didn't you drive one of these overseas
yeah, I
first?
went to Spain to drive it.
That's right.
Went to Barcelona, and it'll be really interesting to see how it goes in the US because it's kind of sort of like a Model 3, Tesla Model 3 rival, but it's an SUV and it's smaller. So
Yeah,
it'll be great in a European city where, parking and just nipping around. I
right.
think it's a tough sell in the US because it's so small. But if you're buying, a lot of people are buying EVs as second cars. So maybe if you're in New York or in an urban center, or you just feel like you don't want to drive around in something enormous, then actually it's quite an appealing alternative. It looks great. Its packaging's fantastic. So the space inside, quality's good.
It
I'm
looks
excited. I'm
nice.
excited by it.
Yeah, it looks nice. You're right. It's a little small, but it looks nice.
I like, I think we talked about this before. Like, I like things like the Honda Civic. I like little cars. I know, like, maybe that's the Brit in me, but there's times when I just don't want to drive in town something which is just, a handful. I like little nippy cars that you can just,
Yeah.
fire around in.
Okay, let's just take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to bring up was something that you and I were talking about a little bit off the air was driver training. You guys do so much driving. You have your great test drivers and stuff, but I always find it interesting that whenever you have the opportunity to sit with an instructor or hit the track, and even try different things. When I went to Texas to the Discount Tire testing facility, yeah, we're there with experts in their field, but we're hitting the track and doing things that you would do a little bit of doing the things that you would do maybe with a driving instructor, but doing it for the sake of tire feedback, right? So that was a super interesting experience, just sort of hitting that and going, we're gonna hit the we're gonna hit the track. We're gonna do exactly the same thing in exactly the same fully equipped, let's say, 3 Series BMWs, and the only difference is the tire, and not even necessarily the spec of the tire, just a manufacturer. Someone's sort of 60,000 mile all weather tire from brand X is how does it perform against the same 60,000 mile all weather tire from, brand Z? And it was just
Yeah.
kind of interesting to see that difference. But um, you guys were out recently as well, right?
Yeah, I just spent actually yesterday, I spent 2.5 hours just doing driver training down the Porsche Experience Center in LA, which is a great facility.
It's a
In a
wonderful
nine
facility.
Wonderful facility with in a 911 with an instructor, Mo, who used to be a drifter, awesome car control. And it was just really, really good fun. And we could talk about this, and I'm sure we talked about it before, but everybody spends so much money on their cars and go faster parts, like the handling package for the Dark Horse or whatever it is. Like, and here is a few $100 put into yourself. You get so much more benefit from training the driver than you do from adding a carbon fiber gurney flap to your
Yeah.
car. And I can never get enough of it. I've been pretty lucky over the years from race training to ice driving to everything else. And, I try and do it like at least once a year. Just go and hone the skills a little bit because you fall into bad habits, your throttle use or your braking and some of your threshold stuff. And,
Yeah.
I've always been somebody who, I guess this marks out like the really pro racers who can just drive absolutely on the limit all the time. My challenge, even when I was racing, is that I kind of needed to feel the car moving around underneath me to know that it was on the limit.
Okay.
So it's like if it was the front end or the back end was starting to slide, I'm right, that's the limit. I'm there, great. But the trouble is, you've lost a tenth in that moment, and just feeling like the absolute limit, I think is the where the talent bit comes in. So I think and then the car control, and the great thing about the experience center down here is you've got low grip surfaces that are wet, surfaces that simulate ice, so you can play around with it at safe speeds
Yeah.
and make mistakes and spin and all that good stuff. So it's just really good. I realized like certain elements of the control I was rusty. Some of the car control stuff was on what simulates ice. The stuff the stuff that I do for filming and everything else I was comfortable at. The
Yeah.
stuff that I hadn't practiced for 2 or 3 years, I was like, whoa, that you got to get your brain back into gear.
Yeah.
So I think it's absolutely invaluable whenever you can get the opportunity. And there's tons of places to do it. There's race circuits, there's facilities like this, and yeah, it's a chunk of change. It's a few $100s,
Right.
but that's nothing compared to your insurance, your tires, your fuel, and you get so much from it.
I always thought that having like a half day course or even a few hours course, a driving instructor course like that should be mandatory to get a driver's license. Now, obviously, the mechanics and the financials of that won't make it possible, but yes, I think if you're driving a car, you should be in a safe environment where you can understand the limits of what a car can do and how to react to a few things, like how does ABS brakes react under hard braking, allow you to change lanes and get out of the way, which is kind of the point of ABS for for the most part. The skid pad or anything like that, and you know the wet track, the dry track, uh, understanding pushing those limits and exceeding those limits. What does it do to feel like to spin the car around in that in a controlled environment? You know,
And
if there was a way
particularly,
to do that, make that mandatory to get a driver's license, that would be
well,
good.
particularly as half this country or whatever it is under snow,
Yeah,
you know, like half the country, you know, and you spend all this time and all this technology building in and all this legislation to have all these safety devices built into cars, you know, emergency braking and lane change keep assist and all that good stuff that is designed to help you brake, avoid an accident. And that stuff's great. But we don't put enough, I mean, the driving test is a joke. You just don't put enough effort into the actual, you know, numpty behind the wheel.
yeah.
And I think it's only when you go and do this stuff that you really understand like the dynamics. And I also say if people are like listening and thinking like, what shall I do? There's also a lot of temptation, and I see this in some of my friends as well. Oh, let's go to Laguna Seca and we'll do laps.
Yeah.
And that's great. And it's fun. It's Laguna Seca and hey, everybody raced here and everything else. But it's not driver training a lot of the time. It's an experience.
Right.
And I think there's a difference, partly because you go to Laguna Seca, a lot of it's lead follow. You can't really make mistakes because it's a big, fast racetrack and it's somebody else's car. Whereas things like the Porsche Center and other things like it actually give you more of an opportunity to learn to drive. And it's almost like two different things. One is Disneyland in a car, and one is actual driver training. And
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between the two. And I think that's where I'd kind of say is if you get the opportunity, focus on the training bit. Um,
Listen, I'm saying parents, all parents that are listening, if you've got a teenager in the house and they're driving or going to be driving soon, uh, if you can afford it, save up a few $100 and you should go and do that. And by the way, I recommend the parents do it with the kids. It's fun. You're always going to learn something. Like you said, you've been driving and racing and doing everything for so many years, but I always end up just paying so much attention to the instructor going, you're right. I knew that. Even if you're reminding me, you know, it's good to hear it again and to have someone calm next to you. Is important. So Radford School, the you know Porsche Experience LA or the various ones that they have. Willow Springs had one for a while. They have the school there. I think they
Yeah, I
still
think
have
that
the
is.
school
I,
there.
and I think the other thing, I think the thing is the Willow Springs thing, but the other thing is like, yeah, the Porsche expense is you use a 911. The charge with a 911, it will do. You know, you use this was a Carrera S rear wheel drive. It would do. You know, you can play around, but it's a really good car.
Yeah,
And sometimes you're almost better in like a lesser vehicle, like an old vehicle. I remember years ago, like training in a really old Volvo that was rear wheel drive, but it was perfect because it was crap. So it meant that like everything you did was at low speed and it was
yeah,
oversteering everywhere. The back end was sliding, you were spinning, and it was perfect for learning the skills. And if you get into something with 700 horsepower and you know mega grip,
yeah.
it's actually not a good learning tool. And that's the problem.
And it's pricey, right? You could drive, you know, a Dodge or something at the Radford School. I want to say Willow Springs is the Danny McKeever school, and he's got like Scions.
Yeah, exactly. And it's. I remember the guy in the UK, and it was my biggest regret that I didn't. Oh, my biggest regret in life, but it was a significant regret that they. I had the opportunity, and I couldn't make the dates work to train with a guy who trained Kimi Raikkonen, you know, the Ferrari Formula One, or his
Yeah,
Ferrari Formula One world champion, and he trained a lot of the F1 drivers. And this guy did it in basically it was we call a Vauxhall Astra, which over here was a Buick. Can't even remember what it's called, like a just a rubbish little hatchback, and he insisted on using that, and he was like, "I can teach better in one of these because it's all about transfer of weight and you know
mhm,
managing the body control and everything else. And what you want is is a hatchback that dives and pitches and rolls
yeah,
and everything else because that's how you understand the dynamics of a car. And you know, Jackie Stewart Jackie Stewart always used to talk about that, and it's that's the genius of it. And the problem with the 911 is so fast and so sophisticated and got so much grip that it's a it's you need an ice track to actually start to get it get it doing its thing. So
Yeah.
it's I love it. I don't think you can ever do enough driver training, and no matter how good you think. I mean, the big thing I was working on was eye tracking. Like, and again, I did a thing years ago with at a simulator, and you have an eye tracker on. Like, where are you looking in a corner? And it sounds ridiculous, but
Yeah.
like when did it looking at a circuit, like, okay, you're at the turning point, you're looking at the apex. And the guy was going, no, don't look at the apex, look at the exit of the corner. And I was like, no, because I've got to hit the apex to get the exit. He's like, no, as long as you've set the cart right and you've turned in at the right point, the car will naturally hit the apex. Look at the exit. You're going to go to that exit. And then he showed me the eye tracking of Kevin Magnussen, who is a Haas Formula One driver and he's
Hmm.
now racing in GT cars. And it was insane. The guy was like looking a mile ahead. It was like he was turning into the hairpin. He was looking at the end of the straightaway. And it was all because his brain was the car was just joining the dots between the two. And it was phenomenal. And it was just like, he's looking ahead, don't look at the apex, look at the exit. And you start to do it and you start to build this rhythm and it all kind of makes sense. It's like, when you throw a football on the beach, you just look at where you're throwing it and somehow like the ball ends up there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same with driving. But, my instinct as an amateur was I'm turning into the corner, I'm going to look at the apex because that's what I've got to hit. Now I'm going to look at the exit. Now I'm going to look at the straight. And the pros are gone. They're like a mile down the track.
Yeah. Right.
It's
And if
fascinating.
you
I
think
love
about
this
it,
stuff.
you're right. I mean, car racing, especially something like F1, is so fast that if you're thinking about that in the moment, y y your brain would work so hard, so fast. But if you're thinking so far ahead, and the rest just becomes sort of the thought you had 3 seconds ago, or even muscle memory, it allows you to slow down your thinking by going, oh, I'm in an apex now, but I'm looking way ahead to the next thing. But the speaking of track, so I think fast lane racing is the school at Willow Springs. And by the way, Willow Springs, I understand, is finally entered a deal into being purchased. And after all the buzz about, a YouTuber or somebody else trying to buy it, ultimately, it sounds like none of that actually happened. It turns out there's a financial company or a private equity company that ultimately is in line to buy it. I want to say it's called Cross Harbors Capital Partners, and then I don't know what's going to happen from there. Uh, you know, when a private equity company comes in and buys it, something like that, do they hire new management? Have they put a deal in place? Like, what's going on? Because it sounded like Willow Springs wanted to sell so they can retire and get out of the business of running a track. But maybe there's a deal in place that they continue to run it. But
I think the problem with that place, because we hire it quite regularly, and if people aren't familiar with it, Willow Springs classic old track, super fast, super dangerous actually, and there's a bunch of tracks up there, and it's amazing, but it is proper old school.
yeah,
It's like there is nothing fancy about it whatsoever. And I think they have a decision that they either continue to just basically run it on a shoestring and it has that like old world character, or you spend millions, probably tens of millions, turning it into something like what they have at Palm Springs, what's it called? At Thermal at Palm Springs, where
yeah,
it's super shishi, restaurants, Ferraris, Porsches, blah, blah, blah. And you just get the super wealthy coming out of LA to go and play. And I think that's the decision. Some of my team said to me, "Oh, we've got to buy it. We can buy it. We can rent it as a test track." I was like, "Yeah, but it's not like," because at one point we said, "Oh, it's going to be like, $2 million, 3 million." I said, "Firstly, it's not 2 or 3 million bucks. It's like going to be a lot more than that. That's just like a tax value or something." I was also like, "What are you going to do with it? Like, yeah, we got to text me. You got to like run it. You got to security. You've got to
yeah,
like develop it. You know, what do we know about running a race circuit up in Lancaster? I ain't got a clue." So it was a
yeah.
nice
Don't have a
idea.
clue. And my guess is it's gonna get it's going to require a significant investment to improve and change the track and its facilities for the sake of the track making money. Like if if you're naive, you want to go in there and go, oh, we're gonna just make the track really cool and we're gonna just rent it out to whoever wants to rent
Yeah.
it. That's not really a business model. I mean, it's not the best business model, but if you can do something and sign deals to bring, you know, significant SCCA or Trans Am and various forms of racing out there with an audience and tickets and like, there's
And
got to be a
corporate
real,
money, right? You want your
yeah, it's got to be some kind of
BMWs
business model.
and corporate, big corporations, big car manufacturers going in. I mean, we use it a lot for filming, Ford and Ferrari, Ford
Yeah.
versus Ferrari. But if Ford for Ferrari was shot there in many ways because it still looks like the 1950s.
Right. Right. It's funny because like modern day stuff, the Hollywood can go, oh, we just go to Willow Springs and then we're going to
Yeah,
film some racing and then we're going to come back and we're going to use CGI to put stuff in the background because it's
yeah,
just dirt in the background and
yeah.
some dead plants and whatever. It's
But
not a
I love
pretty
it for that. Like streets where it's always like it's either cold, it's either freezing cold or hot as hell,
or windy and
or
windy
just windy and
is
tumbleweed
blowing like a
everywhere.
sandstorm.
And 100, or if you go there in the summer, it's like 120 degrees, and yeah, but it's a very atmospheric place, and I miss, Europe is full of old atmospheric circuits, and you have to travel a bit further in the US, but yeah, good luck to them. I hope if they do spend a lot of money and make it very shishi that they which I think they will because it's close enough to LA to be a day trip.
Yeah.
So it makes sense probably to go high end with it rather than make it cheap. But yeah, I hope they keep the character. But
You know,
I
it,
was
it
looking,
it would be interesting, but if they were able to take a portion of the land and partner with a hotel, it doesn't need to be a Ritz-Carlton, but partner with a hotel and get something on the property and have a couple hundred rooms, then I think that changes things significantly. Going, hey, we have a Holiday Inn on the property that has 200 rooms now.
yeah, and secure parking for your Ferrari and blah
Right.
blah blah blah
Yeah,
blah,
and
and
and you
or
can
a spa, and a spa so you can kind of like
some
you do this nice
EV
bar. And
charging and
yeah,
you
there's no EV charging. We discovered that one. Yeah, there is in Lancaster, but yeah, that's not really. Yeah,
right. So there are some improvements. And you're right, there are some manufacturers and other companies that might want to uh, rent or have a facility there, garages, like a nicer suite of garages with hospitality, or like Luna Seca's garages with the two levels. They've got all garages below, they've got all little suites up on the
yeah.
top, and
Matt, we
and
should have bought it, mate. We have all the
yeah.
best ideas.
Yeah, maybe we do have it. Maybe we do know how to run a
Maybe
factory.
that's it. If only we had like $100 million or whatever, we could
Yeah,
have
right?
we could have done it. We could have
Yeah.
all moved to Lancaster, lived in the desert,
Living in the
done a
desert
race circuit.
in a Holiday Inn in
Nothing wrong with a Holiday Inn.
in the suites above the garages. Um,
I've
all
been
right,
happy. Would have been
another
happy.
opportunity lost. Had you
Yeah.
made money on that Fisker, we would have been talking about it. But
I remember like there's a guy called Jonathan Palmer who's an ex-Formula One driver. He bought up a bunch of circuits in Europe. And I remember him saying like, this is either going to bankrupt me or make me a rich man. And I think it made him a rich man, but I think he earned it. I think it's like hard. It's a hard slog.
yeah, probably gave him a heart attack in the process.
I remember the conversation with him. I said, the bit I don't get, right? You get a race circuit anywhere in the world. And I said, you get this like awful burger. I said, you've got people turning up in a $500,000 Ferrari. And why do you serve them like a terrible burger for like
Yeah,
$10? And he was like, yep, I get it. And that's where they started trying to like lift it. Marcus like, why does why do people, it just, the whole thing seemed
oh,
completely out of
totally,
control.
100%. You're right. You're like if you host, let's say, Ferrari Challenge, and
Yeah.
everyone's there, and it costs $50,000 every weekend that they race to host that event, and then it seems like it's prison food. It's
Yeah.
like just slop on a metal
Yeah.
tray, and
Yeah. She's not probably also not what you want to eat before you go racing either.
right.
I mean, I
Yeah, they're
used to
like, we have
race
the
on a
worst
diet.
food,
I
but the
used to
nicest
race on a
bathrooms because you're gonna need it.
I used to race on a diet of drinking the night before, then a bad burger and a can of Red Bull, and off I went to the grid. It was yeah, great days.
All right. Well, I think
All
on that
right,
note, we're gonna wrap things up for
we're
the
gonna wrap
week.
things. I need to go and get the kids from school.
Yeah. All right, guys, thanks so much. Appreciate you guys listening. Check out Edmunds.com, of course, and the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that as well. And CarCast. CarCast is on YouTube. Subscribe to that if you don't already subscribe to the podcast. So thanks, guys. Until next time, keep the air in the spare and the bag in the wheel.